So today we're going to try something interesting, right? We're going to have a conversation about how the development workflow has changed and continues to change as models get better, as our reach of code becomes better. But we all keep inventing new things and it doesn't always translate well enough, right? So today's kind of task for us is to take this game, and I've been meaning to for a long time, right? This game that I built in like 2016, I think it was. Yeah, 2016. For a history class. It's a text-based adventure game that I made for a history class that was designed to, I barely even remember, I wrote it in Python. It took me like the entire class to write it. This is way, way, way back before any kind of LLM's resistance. So every single line is written by hand, probably embarrassing. And so you could kind of travel through the world based on what students had submitted. I'll talk through it as we go further into it. But our job today is to get it running, modernize it, if at all possible, right? This is Python, so nothing really works. It's an old version of Python. The dependencies have all drifted, so nothing really works at all, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we are just going to take this, right? And then we are going to go into, there we go. So I have already cloned this. Let's just open it up in trusty old cursor. And so here's a bunch of things. There's a Flask directory. Man, I barely remember Flask anymore, but that was an entire era. So the first thing you want to do is understand this code and build a general spec for the new game that we're going to build with as much instructions as possible. So indispensable at this point is this tool that I built a while back called Mandark. It was meant to be a coding tool. Everybody builds a coding tool as part of part of their introduction to AI these days. And I don't use the coding functionality anymore. I use the questioning functionality, and on top of that, I use its very easy ability to just take a large code base and then turn it into something that is portable across different chats and different environments. Because modern LLM development today means being able to use any model through any interface across different things, to swap models, compare models, and all of that. And you'll see some of that happen here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it the app folder, the app.py file, and this selection sometimes has an importance to it, right? Don't need the git ignore. I probably need the proc file. Man, this was hosted on Heroku, and I think they kicked me out at some point when the whole Heroku thing happened. So it's just the app file, Flask, and then just these guys. And if I just say AAC, it's just going to copy the entire thing to clipboard. Line tagged and surrounded in appropriate XML tags. This is going to come in so handy. You'll see. So I'm just going to go back, paste it into Claude. I'm going to turn on extended thinking because that's helpful. And the prompt I'm going to give it. But before we do that, let's actually open up a thing. Actually, wait, let's just write the prompt and then we'll copy it over as we go. Okay, perfect. So I've got Mac Whisper running, which means I can just dictate this. So here's an old Python game that I developed just a long time ago. And our general intent is to port this over into something new, like TypeScript, maybe a Next.js project. But first we need a proper understanding of this code base. So can you exhaustively pull out like what this is, what does it do, what are all the key features, how do they work, how are they implemented, the styling, the design, all of those things. We want to pull as much of them as possible so that it can be a standalone. Like standalone in this case is a very useful term to use with LLMs because that gives them enough context, or at least I've noticed, to make something that doesn't refer back to something else so that you have to keep pulling that through context. Document that we can then use to start the rebuilding process. Ideally, this spec should have everything you would need to understand and recreate this program entirely without really caring about code or the specific language that's being used. Make it a markdown artifact so we can keep editing it. So most of my spec work these days and editing work is either in the Claude UI or Cursor because no one else has implemented editing well. Claude, neither of them have also implemented it amazingly well, but they're the ones that are at least a workable solution for what we want to do. And when you start working at large files and then starting to iteratively improve them, you need edit functionality. I'm surprised nobody has figured this out because you really need edit functionality. You can't regenerate each time the same way you just can't do with humans. So while that's working, let's go look at the file and also set up our scaffolding, right? So I'm just going to make a capture new folder. And this has become pretty common practice for me. The first thing I'll do is just make a specs folder and then just start putting my things in there, my useful things in there, right? So I might make another one called, prompts. And then I might actually take this and then paste that in there. That's all handy. It's useful context in the future for an LLM to use, for ourselves to use or something else. And I guess this is as good a time as any to kind of talk about what's happening to development, right? We're moving up another level of abstraction, and that started happening maybe a year and a half ago. Same as, we watched this happen when we went from like assembly to C to Python, right? Early on web development to jQuery to even today something like Squarespace. And as you move up that level of abstraction, the lower level of abstraction becomes almost disposable, sort of throwaway, right? I no longer care about what LLVM or GCC generate as this specific instruction set because I trust that they'll do a reasonably good enough job, and I'm okay happily recompiling it when there's a new version of GCC. So what does that mean for us? Now, to take a small break, okay. Man, that's pretty cool. I remember this now. So you were kind of like, it was called Capture, not Time Photographer. You text-based, you would travel through a historical time period that you'd selected, and this was designed to be a teacher's aid as well. And students, as they did the reading and sort of cover different things, would add in text-based notes based on what they learned. That was also part of what they did. And then you had to play through that, and you could jump forward and back, and you had a bunch of different tools at your disposal. But your job was to be at the right parts of history and then capture a picture, text picture of what happened, right? And today I would auto-generate some of this as well. And then at the end, you'd get a journal of what you saw. And that simultaneously had two big impacts, right? One is everyone is now doing like reading secondary sources and the tertiary sources, them adding that onto the game. And then your path, you might not get exposed to all the perspectives. You might only see some students or some people's thoughts of what was happening at a point in time. So the journals would all be very, very different. And it was meant to kind of convey that history is very much dependent on perspective, that even if you had lived in that time, or as someone who is experiencing that time, virtually, your experience would be very, very different. I mean, I also over-engineered the crap out of it. There was a secondary market system where you could then sell these pictures and have energy to buy fuel for your time-traveling car. Let's forget about all of that. Okay, this is perfect. Okay, so I want you to update this doc and then add additional schemas and examples of code examples of how some things might be interested, quirks of how the implementation actually worked, interesting shortcuts, any parts where I short-circuited something specifically, the input data specs, that kind of thing. We also want some of those things to be portable. Actually, don't edit the doc, just make an addendum, right? Just make one more markdown artifact that is an addendum, resource addendum, let's just say, or examples. Okay, so now that is going, I can just paste that over here. And so we're effectively building this spec, right? I'm thinking I'll make this in Next.js. You can make it in whatever you'd like. I'm just going to do, there we go. We just call it Capture V2. I'm going to just put it in here. Okay. Now I'm going to make a new folder in here saying, and then I'm just going to copy that over. This is a fresh create next app created in Bun. Here are the logs of that creation, so you know what the settings and versions are kind of like. Yeah, I almost instinctually use triple ticks or XML to separate these things out. I mean, what's been good for humans is also becoming very useful for AIs. Like, I want to see that. I want to know when I scan a document, what comes in where, right? So once we're done with that, the next part is going to be, the usual prompt I always ask is, okay, can you now check through both artifacts and then add anything that might be missing or into a third document, right? Anything that you forgot to add, anything that might be useful. Think of it from the perspective of we want to rebuild this as a Next.js app. Talk me through, see, lots of false starts. Okay, perfect. Now I want you to think with me in terms of how we would build something like this, right? Like I want to rebuild this as a Next.js, like just fresh app. how would you structure the stack? We don't want to over-engineer this. This is primarily so I can see it working again. The intent is not to launch it or release it or anything, so definitely don't over-engineer it. Make it something that I can build reasonably in a day, or an AI can build for me. What kind of stack would we be thinking? What would we need to integrate? What things do we need to keep in mind? What could be ported? And then think of kind of like an execution plan of features, how we can grow out, right? Call it level 0, level 1, and level 2. In terms of initial set of working features so we can test 1 and 2, add any sort of styling tips or guidelines to be used, anything that needs to be modernized from the original code as well. Remember, the original code is not going to be part of the context when you build it. These documents you're making are it. Okay, so we are effectively going to try and rebuild it. But while that's going, this is all of our code, right? And now we can get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. And this context is now really, really useful. So often as I'm doing things, I'm trying to expose intermediates of what's happening. And then I'm also trying to build specs and separate that out from the execution. Because I think it's the same for humans. If you've ever managed a team, you know this. If you've ever managed yourself for long enough, you know this. Separating the spec and the execution part, whether it's human or AI, makes a huge difference, right? Because you don't want to be building and then have to constantly hold the mental state of what do I need to build and how do I architect it. And when you're trying to build a spec, it's useful not to be too burdened in with specific execution or specific micro decisions. The cognitive load, if you can split that out, the same applies both to humans and AI. It makes it significantly easier. It's easier to theorize about the properties of a system when you're not too burdened with having to type the code out as you're thinking. And it's far easier to execute on a spec and make changes and fix mistakes when you already have a spec to execute on that you can refer back to, right? That's actually thought through. Okay, so Next.js, Tailwind, Context API, sure. Mapbox, yep. Let's go with Leaflet. Animations is fine. Okay. CSVs need to be JSON. That's okay. Context, local storage, command processing system. Man, this is not a small project that I made. I wouldn't call this a big legacy project. It was just one dev, but I would not call this a small project. Okay. Now also think about how we want to separate this out into engine and front end, right? So the engine, we also want a reasonable test harness, right? Exhaustively describe what tests you would want in that test harness. You don't have to actually write the full code for them or anything. We want that testing doc as well. Okay, this is going to be fun. Let's actually try something really fun. Capture v2. Okay, let me try this. Okay. I apologize if I'm not using some of these tools exactly right. We're all kind of charting our path. Like my cursor setup looks very different from my Windsurf setup, which is way newer. So, don't judge me too hard on this one. Okay, so now that we've started getting our specs, I'm going to take these specs and then start copying them over, right? Sometimes I'll write these in cursor because it's just as fine. It depends, right? Sometimes you want to be able to switch through a few of these things. And cursor doesn't necessarily have that ability. And cursor is not amazing for writing, but just the fact that all the files are there and you can work in multiple files makes a huge difference, right? Okay. Engine, front end, and separation strategy, that's pretty good. Okay, we're writing that. Now that we've got that, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Mandark again and then take the, Let's fix that up. Oops. So AAC, now we've got line tagged code. I can also say no line numbers, and then it's just going to give me that. So that is kind of perfect for us to give it back to Claude really quick. Here's a spec for a game that I'm building. It's based on some old code, but that's not present anymore. This is a general spec for the thing that I want to build. It's not meant for full release. It's really just meant for me to use and sort of get it up and working again. Can you critique this? What's missing? What's ambiguous here? What needs to be clarified more to turn it into a tight implementation sort of execution spec? Give me a list of things. Okay, so that can go. Happily also give it to 4.5. Maybe, that's maybe. 4.5 in the actual UI tends to be pretty crap. They don't let you really push the context length to what it actually is. And they'll often say, hey, we don't have enough context. So that might happen here. We'll see. Okay, so we've now got 3 models actually critiquing it. Okay. Okay, perfect. I'm now going to take this. I'm just going to edit this. UI components, game flow and management, asset requirements. I don't need that. So it's really human-driven development, right? Like if you're not actually using cognitive load trying to build some of these things, you definitely have a lot more left in the tank to do, right? And in a lot of cases, this early work is going to make your later work significantly easier because it's way harder to redirect from a mistake that's now permeated throughout the code base as part of something that the model's doing or something that's already poisoned the context. I see that a lot with Cursor. Then it's a lot harder to do that than to just spend the extra 5 minutes at the beginning, speccing things out, asking for ambiguity and sort of critiquing these things, right? That's fine. Ambiguity. Okay. Locations. Oh, we're still going. Okay. Okay, yeah, we had film, and then film was a consumable. It's a whole thing. Don't judge me. Okay, I'm just gonna put it in specs called ambiguity. Okay. Oh wow. Okay, perfect. So here are a bunch of questions that, based on a review of the docs itself, here's a bunch of stuff that's ambiguous. Can you make me an additional doc that covers all the specifics of the ambiguity, right? So pick some values for starting money, gas, film, and everything else, put them together. Loading process, we can skip CSV to like a level 3 in terms of implementation. We don't have to do that just yet. We do load it on game start and then not dynamically afterwards when we do it, right? Event triggers, make it. Event probability, best choice, make it. Dependencies, we can limit the dependencies. We don't want too many multiple endings here, kind of thing. The journal itself, and make sure you mention the journal, is the multiple ending part of things, right? The UI component, best describe the UI as you can understand from the HTML file in the existing code that I've given you, right? What colors are used, what the styling is generally, so that whoever builds it can build it to be close enough. State in transition, provide some, but mention that it's illustrative, right? Auto save, we can skip for now. Session, we can skip for now. Okay, the command parser, plug that in yourself, right? Ambiguity resolution, put something in there, but it doesn't have to be implemented right now. List of command aliases or shortcuts would be useful. API routes and server-side functionality, make sure to outline that. Do we need API or server-side functionality for any of this? State management, let's just use the context API for now, right? And actually, yeah, make definitive choices on everything. Let's use leaflet for the map. Typography, everything else, make sure you mention that. Economic equilibrium, price fluctuation, you can skip that for now or add some general rule of thumb information. Don't provide multiple options, pick one, right? Pick one that you think is the best. Build process, that's all fine. I'm just mentioning what you need to listen to and what you need to ignore, right? Slightly, yeah, decide how far each command will advance time. The rest is up to you, right? Unexpected consequences, provide some more clarity, but based on the original code. That's what we're trying to rebuild here. Same with the resource questions and live and everything else. That entirely depends on the original code base, which you have access to. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now Claude is going to go off. And this ambiguity testing, sometimes I'll do it multiple times repeatedly with different models because they'll surface things that I don't, right? And as I read through them, I'll maybe get new ideas or I'll get information about what is ambiguous even to me. Sometimes I'll ask really insightful questions. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to make a decision doc. And I'm just going to copy all of these in there so that those can kind of live together, right? So let's do a kind of comparison. In some cases, this might not actually line up, but in this case, we can kind of test, right? So this is about 54,000 tokens. If I take all of this, with our line numbers, that's 1/5 the size, and it's a lot more condensed, and it actually is a lot closer if you think in terms of semantic distance or meaning distance or action distance to what we want to build than the old code was, right? The old code is really just reference. This has actual instructions and decisions, right? And so it's not just that we've compressed the token size significantly in terms of what you need to be looking at, and we've gotten rid of a lot of the useful and useless parts, but we've also then added a lot of cognitive processing to it in terms of making those decisions. So if you just given the old code to a system and said, rebuild this in TypeScript, it possibly could have done, but there's no amount of reasoning tokens that is going to be this helpful, right? Okay, perfect. So now we've got specifics. Okay, now this is going to be fun. We are kind of going to give it to, let me just do that. Cursor, Claude Code, and Windsurf. Let's see who gets there first, right? So if I can just copy that in there. Everybody's got it. Actually, you know what? That's my bad. I'll just like, yeah. So implementation specs is what we want. They'll all get the same input. Okay, perfect. Also see who gets there fastest. I don't know. Maybe I should just give it to Gemini. Gemini is actually pretty good for building from specs. Hey, Windsurf does have an added thing. Okay, perfect. And then we'll get warp. I should remember to I need to fix this at some point. I have not. But they really, really cooked with this one. Okay. Now this is where I'm torn, because I could give it to 2.5 Pro possibly, and then we'll see. So, and then we'll be comparing, you know, almost apples to apples, but we'll see. For the time being, you know, this is not meant to be a scientific test. Okay, so Claude, there we go. Okay, but we probably need to copy the, there we go. Yep, and we need to give it to Claude Code. Perfect. So now we've got that going. Just gonna minimize that so our life is slightly easier. Okay, if we're good to go, I can just hit go. And we'll just let them all kind of run. I'm gonna get a coffee. We'll come back. Okay, first problem from Windsurf. You know, we basically tried to recreate the thing inside of the thing, and I had to tell it no. Okay, so we've already, whereas Cursor's already got, Cursor or 2.5, you know, I don't know who to thank here, has already gone ahead and created an engine folder with a bunch of information about the engine. I would be very, very surprised if this works like minute one in the first round. But it's going to be very interesting. But the good thing here, effectively, is you constantly have the spec that you can refer back to, that you can fix and make updates and changes to, instead of having to run into issues where the code doesn't do the right thing, right, for you. So it's become really interesting where development is going, right? I think, you know, anyone who's been in software dev for a long time with larger and sort of deeper teams has always stressed the importance of good specs, because self-documenting code, as much as I believed it at one time, isn't always true, right? The best code can document itself is in the micro. You can document, I mean, really well-written code is self-explanatory, but in the micro. Maybe a little bit of additional commenting or good names can give you a little bit more, but in most cases, the motivation to do something is lost and mixed together with implementation, which usually has motivation, reality, time pressure, and a bunch of things mixed in. And unpacking that is really difficult. Even for the smartest of people, it's really, really difficult. Did you do it this way because you saw something that I don't? Did you do it this way because you saw some business reason that I don't? Did you do it this way because you just didn't have enough time that day? Or did you do it this way because you just didn't know this was the wrong way to do it? Or a different way to do it, right? So that's where capturing that intention, which is another level of abstraction, becomes more and more and more important, right? As humans sort of work with AI, AIs take over projects entirely. Those specs then become code, right? And that doesn't mean that you can just write down what you want. You need to write down a spec that is almost executable, right? As AIs get smarter and faster, you can almost think of the spec itself as being the program. Think of a spec itself as a program, and then you run it. And much like today, say Rosetta is a wonderful example on Mac. Real time, the code gets generated and run. But that only works if the spec is good enough, right? So this is kind of an example or an experiment, right? What I've been doing for a while now has been trying to figure out how to get specs to a point where they are as specific, capture as much of the intent and motivation. Specific doesn't mean writing the code in the spec, right? Specific means capturing as much of the motivation, contextual information and intent in the spec that it's as good as gone, right? Okay, it's still going. We're not there yet. Okay, so now everybody's off. And this reminds me of the Michael Reeves videos or some of the other ones where he just has, you know, this is all just boring code, I'm just going to go do it. And then you just see like sped up versions of the coding process. I used to go, oh, I want to see the coding process. But now I guess that's what you're seeing. You're seeing 3 different systems, one of them using a different AI, but 3 different systems just try to execute. This used to be my life. This used to be my job. Still is some days, still is sometimes, but this was exactly what I did, which is write that code. And even when I was doing it, there was a massive difference when I started writing specs for myself before I jumped into coding. Even though the impulse as always was to write the first line of coding. And I defended that for so long as to know you write the code to figure out what you want to do, right? My method of development has always been, when I was a dev, REPL-driven development, which is try smaller pieces of what works, get them to a stable state, start building up. But I think it's worth building spec. Granted, it wasn't this easy to build spec back then. AI has also massively accelerated that. You know, you just saw me sort of rant at a computer for a bit while talking to camera and generate reasonably good specs, honestly. If I just open these up, these are actually pretty good. As far as specs go. I've built some far better ones. One of my current pathways has been to build a prompt pack. You kind of saw me do that a little bit with the existing code, and in some cases I might go in and sort of we'll do a more complicated one that I want to build one of these days. Do deep research, condense that deep research down into very useful things, then go to deep research again or perplexity and then say, pull things out specifically that are useful for what we want to do, and then take that with some code examples, with my general thoughts and a spec, put it together into a prompt pack, and then I'll just go for a walk. Some of the most fun walks I've had in my life is to put that into a few different chat windows, take my phone, go for a walk. One time I walked for, not even kidding, 15 kilometers out, and then I had to run home. Because you're just talking and reading, and you read line by line very carefully what the AI says, correct what its mistakes are, have conversations, ask additional questions. And by the end of it, when you get home, you have this incredibly tight, well-informed spec where you've tried poking as many holes in it as you can. This isn't that, but you could be way better than this. Try poking as many holes in it as possible, and it just changes the nature of greenfield development, right? You give one of those to Cursor, or you give one of those to any one of these automated tools, and things just get way better, right? Yeah, Windsurf is just running into issues. I don't even know what this is. It's stuck in some other kind of loop. Okay, Claude Code is already good to go. Are we good? Can we try? Whoa, okay. No errors so far. You're kidding. That is so cool. Okay. Dude, that is perfect. That is not exactly the thing that I had in mind, but it's amazing to actually see it work. That is so cool. Man, I'm so happy. I thought this was lost to the annals of time, and I was never going to be able to. I've looked at this before. Don't know why I'm getting Chinese. Or like, no, sorry. I don't know why I'm getting Japanese. I'm sorry for offending an entire culture there. There's a save button. Wow, there's a load button. That is so cool. Okay. Places. Okay. I have Tokyo, London, Cairo. Go to Paris. Let's go to Paris. And we're in Paris. Okay. Wow, okay. Sleep. Journal. Oh, wow, okay. Call home. Okay. September 16th, 2026. Don't miss it. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Someone approaches me. I don't know what to do there. Okay, so if I just live, I'm going to use up a lot of money, but 60 days. No. Okay. Man, but at the same time, it's working now, right? It's working. I don't even know what Claude Code is doing anymore because it's working. Windsurf is... I don't even know. Cursor is doing its own thing by adding really fun. I think Cursor is like slightly over engineering. I don't mind. So this is using Framer now. Okay. So what I'm kind of going to do is like get more help, right? So, okay. So let's go to the one that Claude made. Oops. Don't have the option there. Okay. Claude Code, right? SRC didn't put anything else. Claude Code did a wonderful job. Put it in SRC. Cursor put it into like an engine folder. I don't know what that's about. Okay, perfect. So how much do we actually do here, right? Let's find out. 16K, that's not that bad. Okay. First pass at a video game that I'm making. It's a port of an older game. Analyze the gameplay here for me. How could we improve the situation? I mentioned that sometimes it tells me that there's a time traveler that I ran into. What am I supposed to do there? How do we make it easier for people to find events? Can we add maybe like, walk me through the gameplay loop and how that could be improved, possible areas of fiction, so on and so forth? This is where I'm also curious as to how different AIs will react, because that's more of a creative question, right? Yeah, let me just go back here. I'm just gonna copy that. Wow. Hey, good job, Claude Code. There we go. Okay, so now we can kind of compare what they think. Oh no, I'm sorry. What am I doing? Yeah. What does click work? I'm curious. Whoa, it did. That was the exact... That's awesome. Okay. What? Okay, that didn't work. Okay. Opium. Oh yeah, this was around the Opium Wars was the specific class that I was building this for. Okay, so we've got all of those problems. Event calendar log. That's actually not that bad. Like, makes sense. That actually makes sense. Randomness and limited discoverability is a problem, right? Rumors is actually a better idea than a calendar. Newspaper and radio is a good idea. Observation points are a good idea. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so Claude Code, because it actually finished early, Okay, since Claude Code finished early, I think it did. Oh, there we go. Okay, let's improve this. Some suggestions are in implementation specs, improvements. Let's go. Cursor, are you done? Okay, we're still kind of installing Leaflet with Windsurf. At some point, I'm just going to close Windsurf. Okay. Okay, I'm actually just going to... This has been a really helpful thing. Switching the model to 3.7 once it runs into these sort of little bug loops, super helpful. I'm not the first person. I don't even know if... I think I independently arrived at it, and then someone told me the day after that that's a good way to do it. Okay, perfect. Granted, this kind of a game you wouldn't need today anyway. You could just give the entire knowledge base to an LLM, and then that LLM can itself serve as the game engine with a lot more verbal fluidity and interactivity. This is meant to be more of an exercise in, hey, how do we code anymore? And just to hang out, play in the background thing of watch someone do something fun that they're clearly enjoying. Okay, that makes sense. I think Sonnet had the best ideas here. Why? No, it's already pretty tight, or at least that's what I'm feeling. Maybe you're just suggesting things that are sort of... That's where I think some models are better at some of these things, and they also veer on different sides, right? This is the same way that when you talk about building new things and you go, hey, how could this be better? In a lot of cases, the suggestions you get are entirely new ideas that will take 3 times the amount of time to implement and execute, as opposed to some other things where it's like, hey, the trade-off, the ROI between how long that'll take to implement versus how much it will improve things is a lot bigger, right? So here, yes, this is great. Doing other things with photos. It's not like I didn't think of that, but that's pretty complicated if we're sticking within the non-LLM deterministic paradigm. Event calendar, enhance call home, clarifying, resource. No, Sonnet was a clear winner. At least for me, Sonnet was a clear winner. And also, Claude Code is still the clear winner, right? Oh, cursor's still going. Okay, let's play our game slightly more. Oh no, it's gone. Hey. And it's also implemented some level of styling, like live styling as things are being typed in. It's actually pretty good. I think we just got restarted by just edits being made. Add something to implement, who knows? But as far as I'm concerned, this is now functional. And once cursor is done, I might close this out. Cursor does run into that. I think that's my ZSH config where it doesn't think it's done and then it just keeps spinning. And I have to click cancel. It will eventually time out and then finish it. So that doesn't stop me from being able to walk away. Okay, let's do something fun while this happens. Okay. I can just ask Sonnet without thinking. Marker icons. I don't even know, Cursor, what are you doing? Okay, why don't we just use a little bit of our tokens and go? Okay, this is the code for a game that I'm building. I want you to write me a bunch of data structures that I can just drop directly into the code with some really, really good story events and things, right? Group each one of those separately, write as long as you can. You've got an unlocked context length. Even with max token set, it's very hard to even get that output out of a lot of these models now. But I'm also going to give it to, except for 2.5. You can get the 60,000 tokens out of 2.5. It has no trouble doing that. It's just that 4.5 is still the most creative model I've run into. So if I want to write something, write a document, get feedback on writing, translation especially for a lot of those, 4.5 is still way better. It is so insanely expensive, though. I have not spent $100 on manual API calls through the playground since GPT-4. So I think it's prohibitive pricing at this point to prevent distillation more than it is the actual cost of running the model. Okay, we've got some decent events. Let's see how Gemini does. And let's actually see who gives us more tokens. Okay, we're still adding Framer. Oh, perfect. So we've now got examples here. You can just kind of click. Man, this is... Okay, I would consider this done. Cursor is still doing its thing. Maybe that's going to work. But I don't know if anything's going to show up. Yep. I mean, hey, the error looks nice, though. But thanks to Claude Code, we've got this thing up and running. I'm just going to go again. Oh, I mean, it's wonderful when things work because it unlocks your imagination and then you can really think through these things in terms of, hey, what else can I do, right? That sort of childish excitement really shows up. When it doesn't, you're often just trying to get it to a working state. That's all you're trying to do. Okay, so that's good. This is good. How do we do here? Hey, it's a few events. Oh, wow. Okay. Do we not? Oh, my bad. I didn't add. There we go. That might break it though. So I might just go. Just commit those changes. It's not that bad. What are the chances it's only like 1,000 tokens, so like 2K? Yep, 1,800 tokens. That's all you can get. It's hard to even push it to 3 to 4K. I think that's a training issue. I think the instruction tuning dataset likely only has short outputs, and also like a RLHF thing. Humans prefer models that are less winded. People who are using models for actual tasks usually almost always want the full output length. But if you're a human's preference analyzer and you're really just looking at what looks better in chat, you want a model that responds much faster. Except for Gemini. Gemini is awesome. So great in terms of what it can do. See, I'm getting just this massive object of events. That's exactly what I wanted. Oh, that's so good. Man, LLMs have really changed development entirely. Like, this just was a different world back when I was making this thing, right? If I go in here, nope, that doesn't work. This was a different world when this was being written. You had to figure out every single thing yourself and write it. And I remember consulting so many documentation things, finding them on the internet, putting them together. It took me the better part of 4 months to make this thing, right? I'm not saying I did it at full efficiency. I'm not saying I didn't procrastinate. I probably did. I definitely did, right? But it took me a long time and a lot of rebuilding to get this working. Just getting this map in the background was a goddamn pain. And I think I got inspiration from like, oh, there we go. Yeah, I got a template from CodeDrops that I was trying to make work. Hopefully CodeDrops is still around. Yep, there we go. We've got, I don't even know what that is anymore. Static files. Yep, most of this was either copied from someone else and then painstakingly modified until it worked anymore. And then a lot of these were sort of, I was going to connect it to Google Drive at the time, or a Google spreadsheet that people could update. I don't think I got around to even doing that. Right? And different world, different time. Let's hope Claude Code is done. Oh, that's 3,000. Man, this is just so great. I don't know where the map went. Hopefully it's going to be in the background, but we'll see. I mean, you just kind of have to tell it that, and then it'll go off and fix it. Rumors. Okay. I think he came up with that. That's pretty cool. That sounds like something that I would have written. Man, that's so awesome. This is back when like just having a text-based adventure game was hard enough to do because you had to do so much manual parsing yourself. Okay, it's still trying to do the thing. And I have to break things to put it back together. I can see that there's a map behind me. The UI, and it needs to be like in a box of its own to the side or bottom center or bottom right so that we can actually see the map. Otherwise the entire thing is blurred, right? Because this is now edge to edge. So that was the idea, right? You had money which you could use to buy gas, I think, at specific spots. And then you had film, which was the consumable for photographs, and so you had a limited number. And once you took a photograph based on where you were, how close to a historical event happening you were, there was a curve that determined the value of that, and then you could sell it to have more money, but you got to keep the information in the journal. So you could just keep taking pictures and selling them. And then at the end, as part of the class or whatever you did, you exported your journal and that was your output. And that simultaneously proved that you played the game, that you'd done something varied, and there was an easy scoring system to go, you did that well, right? Man, that is, yes. It's just so, you know, I don't even know what to say. And now we're in Paris, right? Ah, man, I still think my original styling was better. I don't know what that is. Oh, that's information about where things are. Man, okay. So I'm going to sign off here. I'll make another one about building something really complex and new from a greenfield perspective. And that's going to be more of a question of how do you build even better specs you can go ahead and execute, right? Here we had the original code to start off from as a source, but how would we do that? But this has just been great. I'm just so happy seeing this thing functioning again. Maybe I'll push it up, maybe I won't. We'll see, right? So hopefully that's been fun. I'll cut this down a little bit and speed some parts up.